Welcome to AskPsychSessions with Marianne Lloyd, where we ask some of the best teachers we know questions from you, our audience. If you have a question or an idea for a conversation, please visit bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. That's bit.ly/AskPsychSessions. All one word, all lowercase. And here's our next question.
Thank you for joining us. My guest today is Dr. Rachel Weir from Alleghany College. Rachel, I'm glad that you're here today. How are you?
Good. It's good to be here. I appreciate having the chance to talk about teaching.
Well, I appreciate getting to hear from you about teaching. Before we jump into why I've asked you to be here today, listeners that maybe are not from where I grew up and where you live now may not know much about Alleghany College. So can you tell us about where you are, what you teach there, how long you've been there, anything you think might help give some context?
Sure. Yeah. So Alleghany is a small private liberal arts college. It's in Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is in the northwest corner of Pennsylvania. We have about 1,500 students. I've been here since 2004. I teach in the mathematics department. And I'm just finishing out my first year as director of faculty development here. So.
Great. I think you're our first professor of mathematics, but though we are psychology, we certainly all have a statistics course, or if we have that in our math departments, we have research methods classes that use the things that happen in a statistics class.
Right.
So I think that you will have good information for us about that. And then, of course, being a director of faculty development, the whole point of this podcast is things that hopefully we think that faculty development leaders would find to be good ideas. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about either of those roles. The reason that I asked you to be a guest is because I was doing my own literature searching, having moved into specifications grading in the last couple semesters. And on PsycInfo, I found an article by you about looking at some changes to grading in a pre-calculus class. So would you mind telling the listeners maybe a little bit about either that article or just in general, your own approach in changes to grading in a math course, please?
Yeah. So let me go back a little bit before that article just to kind of set it up a little. So I, back in probably around 2015 or so, I ran into some blog posts by Robert Talbot and ended up trying out standards-based grading for the first time in one of my classes, and then started sort of rethinking how I teach all of my courses after that. It was such a great experience. And then I was on sabbatical in 2017 for the year 2017, and I decided to just sort of step back from how I've been teaching calculus and pre-calculus and think about, given what I've read about what helps students to learn and what creates a supportive classroom environment and all that kind of thing, how would I create a course from scratch that integrates all of those ideas? And so that the article was basically summarizing where I ended up in my pre-calculus course, although I used the same kinds of methods in other courses. And so it turned into a mixture of the mastery-based testing for the math content, but then also mixing in a lot of things like I had habits and skills assignments and those kinds of things that seem really important, particularly for first semester students who are adapting to what the demands of college are and how it might be different from high school, and also coming from a variety of backgrounds. So people have different access to previous experiences with effective study habits and that kind of thing. So by building in those assignments into the course, I was hoping to sort of even the playing or level the playing field so that all students would be aware of like what works and what doesn't when it comes to effective studying and metacognition, like that, those kinds of things.
Great, thank you. So maybe we can move into some specific examples. Like I love that idea, thinking about your habits and skills in a math course. Can you pick maybe one or two of your favorite assignments that you do and tell us about them?
Yeah, well, the first one I always had them do is a mathematical autobiography. So talking about maybe not their whole mathematical experiences, but trying to pick out a couple of positives and negatives and describing how they feel like those have affected their attitudes to math. And those are really valuable for me because right off the bat, it's like the first thing I have them do, and immediately I get some insight into who everyone is and how they feel about math, and also the terrible experiences they may have had in the past, and how that's made them feel about math. So particularly in the calculus that I teach typically at Alleghany is our calculus with pre-calculus course, and we have another just straight calculus course so the calculus with pre-calculus, we cover the same material but in 2 semesters, and we could kind of weave in the pre-calculus review. And the students place into that based on our math placement test. And so they're typically they place lower on the placement test, but they're also coming in with a lot of fear and anxiety around math for the most part. And so for me to try to identify that immediately is really valuable. And also to start to create the environment that indicates that I'm going to be supportive. Like that's what I try to show all the way through, that I'm not a scary math teacher, that I'm there to help them get through. I think of myself more as like their math coach than math teacher. Another one I have them do is a productive failure reflection. So we talk about productive failure and the value of making mistakes, and I try to sort of emphasize, like, thank them for making a mistake so that we could have a good discussion in class about why they may have made that mistake and how to correct it. And so I have them pick out 1 or 2 examples from the semester where they feel like they experienced productive failure, and to describe that. So to give them a chance to really reflect on that and realize that those are the moments when they're learning a lot, and they're not moments to be ashamed of or anything like that. And they're also really great for me to hear about what they're doing outside of the class and having those moments of kind of success after having struggled with a topic for a while.
As I predicted, incredibly transferable.
Yes.
Right, to all.
Absolutely.
To all classes, especially ones with a tough reputation. My wheels are turning. It's like, God, slip some of these into research methods, because I found my students, even with a lot of scaffolding, to write a APA style paper. Methods and results, like, kind of had a formula there, but once they needed to do that intro and start to integrate literature, there was a lot of like just stopping, not writing. So those maybe are some good ideas because I don't think that those fears are particularly different. I have often found teaching stats and methods that the people that love stats are not so happy in methods, and the people that struggle in stats are like, oh, finally I can write. Not some people get skills in both, but I think most of us, maybe we lean one or the other. Can you share your own some of your own now I already forgot productive failures with students as well? Or do you have a story about math not being your dream? It would be inauthentic for me. My dad was a middle school math teacher, so I grew up and, math was like rah, the best thing that could happen to you.
Yeah, I guess for me, math was always my thing. But what I do share is the effect of sort of being labeled as a strong math person, and that can tend to lead to a fixed mindset as opposed to a growth mindset, and the effect that can have, like, in terms of not wanting to take risks.
So you talk about, I'm kind of thinking about now for my own story, right? I'm someone that came in as a double major with math, and then decided to take the sped up calculus because my friends were taking that, and I probably should have taken the standard calculus instead.
Right. Okay.
And then it didn't go well.
Yep.
And I decided just to minor.
Yeah.
So is that the sort of example you mean where, like, I had this story that I was good at math, and then when it got really challenging, I backed way away instead of maybe making a different decision?
Yeah, that's true. And I guess what I talk about is that for everyone, there's a point in math where things get harder, and that point is at different places for everyone. So I know, for example, I tell my students I failed my first math exam in college because I went in thinking it was going to be the same as in high school. I didn't really prepare. I just sort of showed up and got a 50% and then realized, oh, I'm supposed to do some things differently now. So So certainly learned from that. And then in graduate school, that was another moment for me where suddenly it was different. I was being asked to not just sort of memorize things and reproduce them, but to really think deeply and more creatively. And so for me, that's not what had been rewarded in my previous math education. And so hitting that point and thinking, oh, well, maybe this means that grad school in math is not for me, even though I can't imagine what else I would want to do. And so there was certainly some time there where I thought about dropping out, but basically I had no backup plan. So I stuck it out and it turned out okay. But yeah, everyone reaches those points where it gets harder, and that doesn't mean it's the end. It just means maybe you need to change your approach or just think about maybe it's just going to take a little longer for something to click for you. And that's not a bad thing. That just means you're learning. You've reached the sort of boundaries of what you know so far, and you're learning new things, which is a positive thing.
Yeah, and I think not talked about probably as much as it should be. So good to be bringing that in explicitly. Maybe we can shift gears. Mm-hmm. I did poke a little around your website, yes. And it seems like you do some, talking at a broader level, right? Not just about math. So, in this role as a faculty developer, do you want to just kind of talk about where you're really thinking about students right now and student success? I'll leave it pretty open, and then I can poke specifically if you'd like a little more guidance.
Well, so my role as Director of Faculty Development is primarily around organizing opportunities on campus for faculty. So setting up book groups and teaching circles. We have a couple of events called the Educator Resource Institute that happen at the beginning and end of each academic year with different kinds of workshops and sessions. So a lot of it is organizing things on campus. And I guess I came into that because over the time when I've been sort of rethinking my teaching, I've been asked first on campus and then beyond to talk about what was I doing differently in my courses, because it was reasonably novel for mathematics. And then that just sort of turned into being asked to give talks and run workshops and things like that. So I kind of got into faculty development from that point of view. And so now sort of moving into that from a more administrative point of view, but also continuing to do those kinds of things. For me, so I've helped facilitate I've been one of the co-facilitators of workshops on inquiry-based learning in math through the Academy of Inquiry-Based Learning, which was an NSF-sponsored project. And I've also done a lot of workshops on mastery grading, generally really just alternative grading, because I started out using mastery-based testing, specifications grading, standards-based grading. I've used ungrading recently. So it's really a mixture. Every course that I teach now is a mixture of lots of different grading approaches. So it's not just, this is my ungrading course and this is my mastery grading course. Every course is a mixture of all of those. And so I always love to talk about that because I find that people are kind of intrigued by it, but can't always see how to get started on using any of those methods, and also feel like it's a pick one and do that, as opposed to my approach, which I think is a reasonably common approach once people get into it, which is to sort of mix it all together and use what makes sense for each piece of your course. And to kind of help people get started in math, another thing I did during my sabbatical was I put together a collection of mostly syllabi, but some other materials for math courses that use mastery-based or alternative grading methods. And so I solicited a bunch of materials from people that I knew were using those methods. So I have a Google Drive collection of those also.
Great. I suspect some people might be interested in the contents of that Google Drive. Sticking on this alternative grading, students, do you spend some time trying to get buy-in with them? Because this is probably a shift from what they're used to. So maybe if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, from the very first day, I tell them, especially if haven't been in my class before. If they've been in my class, they know what to expect. But if they're new to my class, then immediately I tell them, like, this is not going to be your usual math course in lots of ways. And I don't jump immediately into describing the grading system. I talk more about the philosophy behind it. So starting to think about things like productive failure and what does it mean? What are effective ways to learn and that kind of thing? Getting into the math autobiographies and sort of sneaking up on it, and so and then slowly introducing it over the course of the semester. And what I find is that I need to, every time we do something that's somehow connected to the grading system, I need to pause and explain to them again, like, why I'm doing things a certain way, what the benefit is to them and how it works and how it's different from what they've seen before. So, for example, I don't give exams with partial credit and that kind of thing. It's, for me, we have assessments where there are predetermined learning outcomes, and each assessment has one question for each outcome that we've encountered in course up to that point. And so they attempt those. If they get it right, that they get credit for it. If they don't, then there's no negative result. It just means they reattempt it on the next assessment. And so they don't always believe that until we have the first assessment, and I turn it back and explain to them again how it works and what the effect is on their grade, which is either positive or nothing. And then they start to see how it's working and why it's useful to them to think in that way.
Yeah, I mean, what I like about specifications grading is it's focused on learning.
Yes.
Right. Do you understand this math concept? And can you demonstrate that you understand this math concept? If yes, let's move on. If not, nothing's punishing. I like that, right? You're not losing points.
Yeah.
You're not there yet.
Exactly. It's all about the yet. Like you're not there yet, but you have plenty of other chances to get there. We're going to spend the whole semester sort of getting everyone to a certain point, and people will get there at different speeds, which I think is a huge thing that some students at exam one or assessment one, they've got it and they're checking things off and moving on to sort of more advanced assignments. Other students are going to be on those first objectives for a while, and that's okay, because typically what happens is they pass some things, the first few things, slowly, and then it picks up over the course of the semester. So I'm usually, I try not to be too concerned. It's easy to fall back into the old habits of wanting people to get things checked off as soon as possible, but really it doesn't have to be that way.
That's good. Is there a question where they have to know what the function is to explain how they progressed through things, right? That it was not linear, that it's been too long for me since a math class where it's,
it's true.
Slowly fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Well, great. Well, this is all a lot of stuff for people to think about, but I always like to let our guests have a chance to talk about something they're wanting to share with others. So is there anything that we didn't get to about this or about something else from your experience in the classroom or as a director of faculty development that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I would just say, if you're thinking about getting started with alternative grading, I know it can feel overwhelming at first, but you can always start small. So that's what I did in calculus initially, was to just think about, what are the things on my current exams that I could turn into essentially assessments. So rather than having them do sort of a one and done exam question, how could I set those up as learning outcomes with these repeatable assessment opportunities? And so there are ways that you can kind of do that in small ways. And I think what you said earlier about it's about the learning, I think that's the most important thing. Like, it's really changed the way that I think about how I create my classes. Like, I think in the past it was like, it would have been I would look at the textbook and think, okay, I need to cover these sections. I have this many classes. I divide up the material in that way. But now I start by thinking, what do I most want students to get out of this course, both in terms of content, but also in terms of maybe professional skills or habits of mind, that kind of thing. And then how do we get them to that place? So really that backward design approach has been really valuable for me, and it helps me think about my courses so much more clearly. I feel like I have a deeper understanding of what my course is, as opposed to just a bunch of class meetings that are an opportunity for me to tell students stuff, and then we have some exams. So yeah, it's a lot. I find it really fun to think about my courses in that way.
And I suspect our listeners also would enjoy feeling that way about their class, that there is like a clear. I found myself thinking a couple of weeks ago, what am I even doing? Right? It's like, well, I want to have a really good answer. What am I even doing during our time together? Well, thank you so much, speaking of time, for making time to talk to a stranger that randomly emailed and said, I loved your article. Can we chat? So I appreciate it very much. And I wish you a successful summer, but maybe some productive failures as well thrown in for next year. I have been talking today with Dr. Rachel Weir from Alleghany College. Thank you.
Thank you.